Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome all of you to this interesting session, Mystery Adventure, the human mind crafts vivid fiction. And it's an absolute honor that I'm getting this opportunity, despite not being an author, but being an aspiring one, to talk to two really interesting authors who've written fascinating stories. So thanks a lot for having this discussion with me, Saharu and Arunima. So I just want to make a quick introduction, won't take too much time, but first I'll start off with Arunima. Arunima has written this book called The Ex-Daughters of Tolstoy House. Anyone here who's picked up this book? Okay, fantastic. The ones who haven't, please go ahead and buy this book after the session is over and get it signed by her. It's a very fever dream, like claustrophobic, but at the same time, when I started reading the book, I had so many feelings going on. You can see the sense of impending doom. There's food. There's Delhi. There's just so many things happening, and yet you know that it is taking you somewhere. And there are interesting themes in the book which I'll talk about later. So congratulations, Arunima. A lot of people, of course, rightly have mentioned that it's a fantastic debut that you've made. And now moving on to Saharu. Saharu's written two books. The first one called The Chronicle of Hour and a Half, and the second one, The Menon Investigation. Saharu's first book was won the Crossword Award for Fiction, and the Ata Galata as well, right? And you were shortlisted for the Godrej Lit Live. Yeah. Okay, and many more such things. So one of the things that I wanted to start off this conversation with is two themes. One is imagination, and the second is language. So what actually starts off, or what triggers imagination? So I'll start off with you, Arunima. When you wanted to write this book, or when you thought of this book, what was the trigger? How did you come up with this idea? And how would you describe it in a line or two?
So to describe the book in a line or two, thank you, Sachin, for saying very nice things about the book. I'd say this is the story of a family that has said yes too often. It's the story of a mother and her daughters, and a father who is a serial killer. And it's about obedience and complicity in a family, and how that kind of shapes people and what they do and how much they're willing to do. The idea came from something much simpler. It sounds very grand when one is able to, distill the idea into a sentence. But I think the first thing that came for me, much like many of the short story writers, was an image. I had this image of a cremation, a Hindu crematorium, and there's a body on a white, as they are, but the face was covered. And normally one can see the face of the person before the cremation, and in this the face is covered, you're not allowed to see the face. And there was a, why can't we see the face? And I think from that question, it became, what has happened to the face? And you get to know right in the beginning, so something is missing from the face. And that triggered the idea of, this is a family where something is now missing.
Right. And I heard you, I listened to you on another podcast where you were talking about when it comes to patriarchy, it's almost like, let's say, if the patriarch of the family doesn't like a specific kind of vegetable, the vegetable doesn't get made in the house. And I'd like you to build on that. I'd rather you have.
Sure. So I think what I was, the thing is, when we discuss a book, we start talking about, patriarchy and feminism and things like that. And of course, these are issues that are in the novel, because I'm writing something, I'm a feminist, it's going to come out in the work. But it was a story first. And it is always a story first, and then there are themes that come out of it. So I think the idea that I was talking about was that sometimes we don't see the patriarchy around us because we consider it very normal, in that if, say, the man of the house doesn't like a particular vegetable, carrots, for instance, carrots are rarely made in that house. It doesn't matter if the mother loves it or the child loves it or something. It generally goes with, he doesn't like it, let's not cause a stir, so we're just not going to make this. And we think that's okay. And then someone says, okay, your grandfather says don't wear shorts, and you say, it's okay, let's not cause a stir. And the idea of this novel was, if we keep pushing this slightly further and we see just how far you kind of shrug and say, okay, fine, I'll listen, will you also say, okay, fine, when you kill, I'll clean the blood up after you? Because that is what's happening in these families, who are just saying, okay, 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 and you listen. You forget how much are you listening? And you kind of lose yourself to trying to obey, trying to please, because your safety is in this obedience and pleasing the kind of man of the house. And that's what the novel is actually about.
Fantastic. Thanks, Arunima. I'll come to you, Saharu. Saharu, what was the origin of both the books that you've written? What was the trigger for you to write these books and these stories?
Both the books? I don't remember triggers. I write daily. I have ideas and I sit down and develop it. I don't think triggers are for people who happen to write a novel, you know, when they find a subject surprisingly. These are not for writers who are sitting down every day for 10 hours, 8 hours a day to write books. So I have my ideas for a very long time, and I'm developing, you know, them. I'm spending adequate amount of time, and yeah. My first novel was about mob lynching over an extramarital affair, and the reason I have offered a couple of reasons. One of which was that, you know, in Kerala, it's a society where, you know, Malayalis live under this perpetual fear that someone other than me is going to have sex, and they have to prevent it. I thought, you know, I would portray that, and I also wanted to bring in, you know, WhatsApp. But essentially, that novel is not about any of this. That novel is, I conceive that novel to be about two women who have very different responses to, you know, the same kind of situations. So this was about the mother figure of the victim of the mob lynching, and the mistress of the man. And I wanted to contrast their characters. This is what I had done with my first novel. The second one, The Men and Investigation, it is an investigation into the investigator himself, which is why its title is The Men and Investigation. The book is about, I myself don't remember. I think the book is about, there's a murder happening, and a police officer gets murdered. Case goes cold for 8 years or so, and somebody picks it up, and then, you know, things turn around. This is what I had done. One of the major themes of the novel is how deeply ingrained caste and color consciousness in our society is. Yeah. So it is on that, yeah. So I think that skin color is a major ingredient of our aesthetic sensibilities. And I thought I would pick up on one. And I thought that the best person to represent that disorder is an upper caste man who is expected to look fair, but my character doesn't. Yeah.
And that's something that he's very guilty of. And both the novels, whether it's The Ex-Daughters of Tolstoy House, The Men in Investigation, at least when I was reading, the pervasive, I mean, the overarching theme did seem like patriarchy in both of them. But I've heard you speak, and you say that as a writer, you are not putting any kind of activist kind of lens to what you write. Yet, those are the messages that I take as a reader. So, I mean, I just want you to talk a little bit about
literature
that.
doesn't have conversionary power. This is a mythology invented by bad writers. You are not going to read a book and go back home and decide to be non-patriarchal. That's not how reading or change in life works. Change is a very slow and intergenerational process. Literature, so if you, I always tell these people, if you want to sloganeer something, as you know, don't call it poetry, just call it slogan. Inspire people. It's a very, very important thing to do. In the same way, when you write fiction, for example, I'm writing about mob lynching. I told you that there is a mother character and there is a mistress character, and I wrote that entire novel basically to contrast these two women's responses to the same set of situations they find themselves in. And so if you ask me, is it about patriarchy? Of course. these ingredients are there, but that's not novel is about. Novel is essentially a storytelling. And storytelling can't be, supplanted by your what you think is right and wrong. People know rights and wrongs. We need not to educate people, don't do this or don't do that. People are deeply aware. Human beings can go to sleep lying to itself. Human beings would like to think that the moment they have changed, everybody else also must change. And then, even religious texts do not have conversionary power. This is again another mythology. Even people don't convert into from one religion to another just because they read, Quran or Bible or Gita. Largely, books don't have such a conversionary power. And that awareness of the limitation of one's trait is an extremely important step in deciding to be a writer. You are not supposed to do what you are not supposed to do. And storytelling requires linguistic, cognitive, rhetorical, character investment. And these are easily washed away once you focus on what you think the novel should do. In fact, it should be self-referential, which is why I'm saying that, when I'm writing that novel, Man and Investigation, in which supposedly in which an upper caste man who is supposed to look fair, but who looks dark and is mistaken for a lower caste man and is haunted by it. People have epithets for him. Vijay Menon is called often, Reservation Menon. He is called Dark Menon, Sudani Menon, Kapiri, like whatsoever. Now, imagine that character. If you occupy that character in your head, you understand that that person really has a lot of problems in life that can't be judged away because you don't like him. Obviously, he tries to stop, an inter-caste marriage when his own daughter is in love with a lower caste man. But his character complexity it develops out of our society, and our character development has to, account for our societal complexity, which can't easily be challenged by individual revolts. Yeah, please.
Got it. So, Arunima, your take on this, like how much of your writing or your imagination is informed by your worldview, your biases, or what is it that you have set out to achieve, as opposed to what Saharu
I actually don't think we've said anything different because when Seth was talking, he's saying the exact same thing. He is coming from, he wants to talk about caste, he wants to talk about intercaste, he wants to talk about a mob. He's picked up all the kind of hot kind of points in society at the moment. I'm saying the same thing. I'm saying I wanted to talk about how much women kind of accept in relationships, in marriages, in homes, in families. I'm talking about how much men get away with, how much rich men in this country get away with, because Tolstoy House is also called Tolstoy House. It's on Tolstoy Marg, which is a very prominent road in Delhi. So the idea is that this is an influential man. It's a large house with high walls, so you don't see inside. It's about that kind of person. So I am talking about something specific. But I wrote a story. I did not write this to no book, I don't think any author who's writing a story and wants to write a story is telling you patriarchy is bad, learn this. The idea is also experience what's happening to these characters. And in that, do you perhaps notice what's going on? Maybe. So, for instance, as you mentioned, there's a lot of food in the book. And the idea of a lot of food in this novel is that for many of us, I think food is a very instinctive thing to think of as a warm, kind memory, especially as most of us will have an older female relative who has made food, which is something comforting for us. So what happens when you take something that's instinctively comforting and push it into a territory that's uncomfortable? What happens when food is used as a tool, as power? Because for many women who exist only in the domestic space, the kitchen becomes where they have the most control and the most power. So when you don't eat their food, it's not you're not hungry, it's you don't love your mother anymore. Or when they make something and don't share a recipe, or they steal a recipe from someone and don't tell you and say it's theirs, it's because their value they feel in that household exists only because they're being able to give you that. Now, I'm not coming to this saying, oh, look, the poor woman. I'm coming to with a story saying, look what happens to this woman as she collects recipes from an ex-girlfriend of her husband and tries to pass them off as her own in a kitchen because she wants her husband to love her more. What is that feeling? And I just want you to experience that feeling. I'm not saying start understanding patriarchy. So actually, I think we're coming from the same space.
Got it. Also about the places where these stories are set, right? Like for instance, Saharu, Kerala is where your stories are set, and Arunima, yours in Delhi. How important do you think it is for a writer to understand the place to be able to create this kind of, or would it still be okay for you to write about a place that you don't know intimately well? And if yes, how do you do that? Is that...
I have so far, I've written one, I'm writing my second and my third. I have only written about places that I know well. I don't think one can't. I think I have I've set small scenes, I've set weekends away in spaces that I may not have visited. But I enjoy writing about a place that I know well. I enjoy writing about Delhi. I like writing about a kind of urban, rich Delhi that we don't see as messy and as dirty as it actually is. And I think till I get tired and bored of writing about my space, I will keep writing about it. But I don't know. For me, I can imagine many things. I'm not sure I can imagine a city. So I would tend to root my stories where I am.
I've become her patriarchy's reference. Every time she's talking about patriarchy, her hand goes my way. I think I eat carrots.
I don't.
Yeah. So look, it's not important. I find it's very difficult for me to give very serious answers to very serious questions. I'm not a very spontaneously articulate person, and I get very, very, very. Even though I may not look like it, I'm actually a very nervous person. I don't know if it is the cold of the AC which is making me shiver or the nervousness, but yeah, and especially I'm troubled by attentive audience. They really expect you to give you a very, very, very thoughtful answer, and I think that it's not important. Everything is important, but it's not so important that you sit in a place and discover this and go around Delhi watching it. These are not important. A book of fiction doesn't capture very accurately spaces, and even your reference doesn't have to really portray accurately a city. You can make up details. If you are going to Calicut looking for the places as narrated, it wouldn't look anything like that. Language creates its own realities, and which is why, and novels also. So literature does help society imitate it. This is true. Now it becomes too serious. Love has become too serious. Now literature has to re-educate them. Itna bhi zyada mat karo. Thoda संभाल के करो. So and this discontent of monogamy, human beings are not monogamous. Human beings are absolutely not monogamous. You know it. I don't care who you are, but every information that I have of human beings tells me that human beings are not monogamous. You are trained to be monogamous, and the discontents are here.
And in some sense, that training has happened through literature, right?
Sometimes, I read Shakespeare, and then I try to, you tell your girlfriend that it's good, I love you for these reasons or those reasons. You think about this, the way we talk to each other, why you love me. People often ask. I often don't answer. Because I can tell you something. Two people fall in love with one another for absolutely two different reasons. And you can't reconcile it. You can't, there is nothing called love. There is class, there is, religion, there is caste, there is skin fairness. You account for everything in a human body, and then you fall in love. And if you account for all those in your body, then that is not love. Or at least not the love you project. So we are in a very convenient, interaction. We know what to talk about, what not to talk about, in a house, outside. Literature has to really talk about things that we are not talking about, that we suppress, that we don't talk inside the house. This is one reason why I'm saying that my novels are not, pleasure documents. They are pleasure documents, but still, you wouldn't be, if you are going to read my book thinking that some of these qualities would, validate my own feelings about the world, it probably won't. Because I don't have a great opinion about myself. It's very, very unlikely that I have a great opinion about you either. Literature thrives on human limitations, not human possibilities. And those awareness, so that's what I said earlier, an acute awareness of one's own limitation as a human being is quintessential to the art of writing. Quintessential. If you are writing novels, just go to your home, get naked, look into the mirror. Look into your mirror. You will understand that you are just another person. We are not who we project out to ourselves to be. Language is a mode of veil. I can deceive you endlessly. I can deceive all of them endlessly. I know that you can deceive also, your family, me, her, everybody. We are all actors. But there is an awareness also in human beings that can be activated through literature so that we become a little less certain about who we are, or at least who we claim we are. And literature has a role to play in that. I think that's what my work is doing.
We're all having fun and we are all getting to learn.
Literature is a lot of fun, When people are made to talk about it, they make it as if, it's a pain. It's not a pain. I'm having a lot of fun writing literature. I'm not someone who wakes up 4 o'clock in the morning and decides to be depressed for the rest of the day. I'm very, very fascinated by literature and what it has taught me and what I can produce also. I have immense faith in myself also, which is why, if without immense faith, you wouldn't wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's not the right time to wake up if you don't have confidence.
Good one. So I'm going to switch over to Arunima now. So Saharu mentioned that all imagination comes from memory. Whatever he has read, whatever he has gathered, so he knows a lot about forensic surgeons because he's read stuff, and that is how Padmini's character in his book does whatever she does, and he is able to explain that. How do you think you approach your ability to imagine? Is it just reading? What are the other things that you are able to bring in from your own experiences into the book, and of course push them a little further as a writer?
So I think at least for the first novel, I wanted to write about everything I'm interested in. One can imagine and one can look beyond oneself, but I think when I was writing for the first time, I was very clear that I want to only focus on things that interest me. So everything the characters are interested in are also things that I would like to research about. I've been a chef and a cook, and so there is a lot of food. Of course, there is memory because there are a lot of recipes. If you do read the book, the recipes all work. They're all recipes taken from my grandmothers and other people. And so that is coming as a kind of collective knowledge that I have kind of taken from many people. But the other thing that the book is very deeply influenced by is endometriosis, which is, I have a friend here who's a fellow endo buddy. But endometriosis is a condition where it has many issues, but one of the issues is you bleed very heavily every month. And one of the earliest kind of theories of why endometriosis happens, which is now not a real theory anymore, was something called retrograde menstruation. And when I was reading up on endometriosis, because it's something I have and something I suffer with and deal with constantly, and so think about constantly, I read up on retrograde menstruation, which was this understanding that instead of the blood flowing out of the body once a month, it's actually flowing inwards, which is not what is happening. But as an idea that sparked that what happens to a woman, suppose she is not releasing that blood every month, instead she is taking someone else's blood and putting it inside herself every month. So definitely it is things around me that inspire my writing. This is kind of the core theme in the novel, because I had this serial killer father, and so the idea is, if a man is killing, what is the toughest thing to clean after you kill? It's blood. And if you can get away with cleaning the body, you can get away with murder. So what happens if his daughters are the people who can help him clean up the body? It creates a very different family dynamic. And I couldn't have thought of that if it wasn't something I was dealing with every day. I couldn't have thought of this if I hadn't had surgery for endometriosis, which I then watched back, and it's a 3.5-hour surgery where I see them go inside and they're nipping away and they're pulling out the blood, and it's very, very graphic, and it was very fascinating. But if I hadn't spent 3 hours watching someone pulling blood, it's like burning blood, pulling blood clots out of the body, cutting blood, like dried blood away from inside the body, I would not have been able to think of what happens to a person if they're holding on to something that is dying and decaying inside them. So that's kind of how this came about.
Got it. And so the last theme that I want to touch upon before I open, for audience questions is language. Saharu, we had a spirited conversation last night about that's why I use the word spirited, on the superiority of the textual language that English is, and how...
One thing that I have learned, and I'm going to, increase my criticism on this front, that Indian English novelists are constantly being told, in whatever way it is, by publishers or editors or reviewers, whoever they are, Indian English writer has to sound like a translated fiction in order to be appreciated and seen as authentic. My trait, there are multiple reasons why I write in English, because I owe my education to English. And I think a textual tradition in the West is far, far, far more, stronger than our oral traditions. Why do you expect Indian English writer to, deliberately make their text sound like translated text? I can't understand that. Does this woman in Kerala can she speak this word? She can. Apparently, I'm writing in English. Malayalis don't speak English. So obviously, when I'm engaging in English language fiction, I'm going to also invest in the nuances of that language. I'm going to enrich my text by abusing that language to whatever extent I can. And this is how language is developed. In fact, language is, Bishop Berkeley, the English philosopher, was once asked, he said that, it's like having a contact with reality is like, eating an apple. Apple in itself is not tasty when it sits on a table. It requires a contact, and that contact is my mouth. That's how apple becomes tasty. Language is that contact between the reader and the writer. And if your language is weak, if your language is not heavily concerned with its literary merit.
I'm going to ask one last question to Arunima before we open the session for the audience questions. I know was Saharu's approach. He was telling me last evening that when you are working on the craft of writing something, the expectation that the writer should come down to the level of the reader to make it simple enough for the reader to understand is a unreasonable one. as opposed to that, the reader's aspiration should be to understand the writer and sort of understand language that well. How do you think about your writing? I mean, what are your thoughts on language and its use when it comes to the books that you are writing?
So I don't think the goal when anyone's writing is simplicity. So we're not trying, if I was writing just to communicate, I wouldn't write a whole novel full of themes and plot B and plot C and characters that do one thing and do another thing. It's a very poor form of communication. If I want to tell someone something simply, I would just say it in a sentence. I think the idea of the novel is to craft it as beautifully as you can. The fun is in writing that third draft where you play around with a word about 25 times, where you, as you said in the beginning, for instance, that you felt claustrophobic. That's a choice that I've taken as a writer. It's not something that will happen if I was saying, how can I effectively communicate this? It's not an ad, no? It's not something that you're supposed to understand in 2 minutes. So I'm not looking for effective communication. I'm looking for what is the most satisfying form of communication for me. And that can sometimes be far more complex, and it could be perhaps very irritating for the reader. I mean, Joyce can be incredibly difficult to read and very, very tiresome. Sometimes Shock and Shakespeare. It's not, I don't think they were writing to say, let's make something easy. We're making something beautiful or interesting or ugly, but it's something that is, we've thought about what kind of shape we want words to give.
So you as a reader, I think you ought to be open to, a diversity of prose. And writing schools are killing that.
Saharu, since you've given us the beautiful headline for the session, writing schools are killing writing, we'll stop here because I'm sure the audience wants to ask a few questions and we are running out of time. Anyone with any questions? Okay, the lady, that's Megha, I think, if I'm not wrong. Can we pass our mic to...
This is going on YouTube as well? Oh my God.
Hello. Yeah, my question is for Saharu. I know you are not a native English speaker. When you are trying to write, what is your thinking language? Do you think in Malayalam and try to put it in English? Or you think your stories in English and then put it in your words?
English. I think in English.
Okay.
I mean, it's not a language that I learned. I learned the language when I was 19 or 20. I was a Malayalam medium student. I realized that these people who are heavily, patronizingly championing native languages, were actually quite comfortable in English. And it seemed to me that I had to learn this language in order to catch up with the savarnas of the country. And I did that. It's a native mother tongue love has become, a lower caste burden.
Saharu, we'll give the audience to ask one question to Arunima before we end the session. Anyone with a question for Arunima? Yes.
Arunima, just quickly, you wrote about a very complex topic. So how much research it took you, for example, in serial killers or, crime procedurals and all that? Yeah.
No, I don't. As I said, at least for the first one, I was only doing things I enjoyed. I have unfortunately been reading about and following crime, the newspaper mainly. It's a fascinating source of information. For the last 15 years, for as long as I can remember, I have known unnecessary facts about serial killers. So it really wasn't research.
Okay, cool. I think we've run out of time, so I'm going to end this. Thank you both Saharu and Arunima for a fantastic conversation.